Piaget's approach to cognitive development. This video will investigate Piaget's contribution to cognitive development, his theories of which relied on observations on children, as well as interviews and the experiments that he conducted about object manipulation. He looked at infants longitudinally, taking a long period of time, but looked at children cross-sectionally, or by the cohort. Piaget first proposed active construction of knowledge, in that children instinctively or intrinsically were motivated to learn, and that maturation drove them to seek and explore the environment. This aligns well with his theory that cognitive development occurred in a series of stages, in which behavior and thought reflected underlying mental processes. These stages are comprised of schemas, which are thought patterns, used to understand the experience in reality. The schemas change over time through the process of assimilation, which is where new information is incorporated into an existing schema, while accommodation is where a schema is revised and updated. This causes periods of equilibrium, where everything is according to expectation and one merely needs to assimilate knowledge into an existing schema. This equilibrium is when accommodation takes place and the child is required to change their mental schemas. Piaget proposed that there are 6 sensoromotor stages that occurred from birth to 2 years of age. These stages represented increases in cognitive and motor ability. The first stage is the reflexive scheme, which occurs from 0 to 1 months. During this stage, the baby can only use reflexes to move, and they construct the world that they can see and sense. The second stage is the primary circular reactions, which occurs from 1 to 4 months, and it is where the infant repeats actions that are based on their own body. They at first accidentally engage in an action or reflex. Then they learn to generate voluntary actions. This subsequent stage is the secondary circular reactions, which occupies the period of 4 to 8 months, and is where infants are more object-oriented, interacting with objects beyond their own body, like dropping objects from their chair and shaking a rattle. Furthermore, the fourth stage is the coordination of secondary schemes that occurs from 8 to 12 months and has goal-oriented or goal-directed behavior that allows for combining several secondary schemes together, such as, for example, to take a toy, an obstacle must be pushed away. The tertiary circular reaction occupies the period between 12 to 18 months and is the deliberate use of trial and error to understand cause and effect. The infant actively experiments to discover the outcome of actions, such as, for example, hitting, chewing, and squeezing a toy. Finally, there is the symbolic representational thought, which occurs from 18 to 24 months, and is the mental manipulation of cause and effect relationships. It is the birth of abstract thinking. Another important thing to consider is object permanence, which is the awareness of objects when it is out of visual range. It was believed that infants did not attend to objects that are hidden because they thought the objects no longer existed. Balogun and DeVos in 1991 stated that, on the contrary, babies predicted visually where an object would reappear, and that they stared longer when a car seemingly went through a box. The A not B error is when an object is missing, the infant will go to the last place they saw it, which develops around 8 to 12 months. Balogun and Graeber or Graeber in 1988 speculated that infants who have no ability in reaching also engaged in A not B error through their ability to attend to something, and that this was probably due to deficits in memory and attention. The next stage in Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development after the sensoromotor stage is the pre-operational stage, whereby children learn to gain mental representations but engage in one-dimensional thinking. They can engage in drawing and make-believe play to build up their representation of the concrete world. Children also engage in egocentrism, which is the inability to discriminate between their own and others' perspective. They haven't completely distinguished between the self and the world, making it hard for them to take another point of view. Also, children believe in conservation, which is defined as how physical properties of objects do not alter when their outward appearances change. An example of this is the conservation of liquids task, where moving water from one jar to a different shaped jar occurs. What can be taken away from their failure to conserve includes a perceptual bound static thinking that is one-dimensional and lacks the capacity to mentally reverse the transformation. The problem with these is that perhaps the question isn't clear in distinguishing between volume and surface area, or appearance, and that may confuse the participant. McGarrigle and Donaldson in 1974 believe that children may be expecting a trick question from an adult. Mental capacities that emerge from this period of time include classification, which is where objects are grouped into categories, sets, and subsets. Also seriation, which occurs where stimuli are mentally ordered along a quantitative dimension. Children from this period also believe in artificialism, which is the belief that all natural phenomena are the products of human design. They also attribute tangible quantities to events of the mind in what is called realism. And preschoolers engage in animism, the mistaken belief that non-living objects are alive or have human attributes. By 7 to 11 years, children reach concrete operations, where they can perform mental actions on objects, but only on what they had experienced before. Logical reasoning replaced intuition in concrete circumstances and can mentally reverse actions, which allows for conservation. Mental operations are internalized, whereby, for example, addition and subtraction can occur in the head as opposed to counting fingers. They, however, are still not able to engage in abstract processes like algebra, whereby symbols are used. Finally, there is formal operations, which is the final stage of Piaget's cognitive development that occurs beyond 12 years of age, and is where mental operations can occur on the symbolic representations. Individuals can engage in abstract, idealistic, and logical thought. They engage in hypothetical, deductive reasoning to generate hypotheses. They also have metacognition, being aware of their own mental operations, such as modifying memory strategies, for example. A reflection and questioning of values, the meaning of life, religion, consistency, hypocrisy, beliefs, and motives are all put into question during this period. Elkind in 1976 proposed adolescent egocentrism is the belief that others are as interested in them as they are in themselves. And this includes beliefs like imaginary audiences, whereby it is thought that everyone is looking at them. Personal fable, which is the notion that no one else can truly empathize with how the individual feels. And also invincibility, which is believing something bad can't happen to them. Adult cognitive function is thought to be beyond formal operations, and it allows for relativistic and contextual thinking. It involves the capacity to develop more than one solution to a problem, engaging in flexible thought. The strengths of this model, of Piaget's model that is, includes modes of thinking that affect behavior and can influence multiple domains like perception and motor development, as well as the theories emphasizing on active constructive development of cognition. It has ecological validity in focusing on the everyday life of children, and the theory saw how children were of a different kind compared to adults, as opposed to just being small adults. They actually thought differently. Limits to this theory include fuzzy boundaries between stages, the lack of universality, since observations were obtained from Western cultures, and also underestimation of infants and preschoolers' abilities. Also, Piaget's method had tasks that were too complex, had a small sample size, and the questions were flexible, but that made it hard to generalize. In summation, we looked at Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development, including the 6 sensoromotor stages, the pre-operational stage, concrete and formal stages, as well as conceptions like reflexes, assimilation, accommodation, equilibrium, and disequilibrium, egocentrism, conservation, animism, and also adolescent egocentrism. Thanks for watching.